Daniel Carter was a man who never made mistakes. In the world of tech startups and billion-dollar mergers, he was known as the fixer. He didn't just build companies, he turned them into empires. But for all his boardroom brilliance, there was one area of life that left him fumbling in the dark: fatherhood. Ever since his wife, Amelia, passed away 2 years earlier, Daniel had been navigating the stormy seas of single parenthood alone. His 7-year-old daughter, Sophie, had once been a bubbly child full of giggles and sunshine. But since Amelia's death, she'd gone quiet. Withdrawn. She rarely smiled and never talked much, not even to Daniel. He blamed himself, always feeling like he was one step behind her grief. So when it was time to enroll Sophie in school after their recent move, he handed the paperwork off to his assistant and focused on work. He instructed her to enroll Sophie in Willow Ridge Academy, the most prestigious private school in the city. Ivy-covered walls, gourmet lunches, elite programs, security, reputation, it checked every box for a man who thought the best came with a price tag. But 3 days later, Daniel received a phone call that would unravel everything. "Hi, this is Miss Collins from Meadow Lane Elementary. I just wanted to check in about Sophie. We don't have your emergency contact listed." Meadow Lane Elementary. That wasn't the school he chose. Panicked and furious, Daniel canceled a meeting with investors and drove across town. When he arrived at the modest red brick building with peeling paint and a cracked basketball court, he couldn't believe it. This couldn't be right. He stormed through the front office, demanding answers. That's when he saw her, Miss Grace Taylor. Young, mid-20s, wearing a long, floral skirt with chalk on her hands and compassion in her eyes. She was seated on the floor, surrounded by kids, helping them build a paper city. Sophie sat beside her, quietly cutting construction paper. And for the first time in months, Daniel saw something he hadn't seen in his daughter: light. Sophie was smiling. Daniel hesitated, caught off guard. He stood at the classroom door, not knowing whether to interrupt or watch. Grace noticed him and walked over, wiping her hands. "Mr. Carter," she asked, not with fear, but with curiosity. "I think there's been a mistake," Daniel said stiffly. "My daughter was supposed to be enrolled at Willow Ridge." Grace smiled gently. "She's doing very well here. Quiet, but thoughtful. She made a friend yesterday. That's a big deal for her, isn't it?" Daniel blinked, unsure how she could know that. "She told me about her mom," Grace said, softer now. "She said she misses her, but she's trying to be brave." He looked through the window at Sophie, laughing as another girl placed a paper crown on her head. Daniel didn't say much after that. He thanked her and left, confused and uneasy. He had always believed money could buy the best. But what if the best thing for his daughter wasn't the most expensive option? The following days turned into weeks. And despite his initial resistance, Daniel let Sophie stay at Meadow Lane. Every morning, she bounced into class with a growing sparkle in her eyes. Grace sent him weekly updates, handwritten notes about Sophie's progress, little stories about her drawings, her shy friendships, her healing. Daniel started showing up more often. Sometimes to drop off lunch, sometimes to attend class plays, sometimes just to watch. And every time, Grace was there, guiding, listening, encouraging with warmth he hadn't seen in anyone since Amelia. Eventually, they began talking more. At first, it was about Sophie, her reading struggles, her artistic talent, her grief. But slowly, the conversation deepened. They spoke about life, loss, and love. Grace shared that she'd grown up without a mother, raised by a grandmother who taught her to lead with empathy. Teaching wasn't just her job. It was her calling. Daniel found himself drawn to her. Not just because of what she was doing for Sophie, but because of who she was. Real. Grounded. Compassionate. The kind of woman who remembered the names of every child in the school, who stayed late to help struggling parents fill out forms, who used her own paycheck to buy classroom supplies. But life wasn't a fairy tale, and their growing connection came with challenges. Daniel's world was filled with scrutiny. A relationship with a schoolteacher became a point of gossip among shareholders and tabloids. His board warned him that associating with someone beneath his status could hurt the company image. Investors whispered. Willow Ridge's headmaster even called, offering to personally insure Sophie's late enrollment if Daniel wished to correct the misstep. Daniel was torn between two worlds, the polished, powerful image he had spent his life building and the raw, honest life he was beginning to crave. The final decision came unexpectedly. One afternoon, Sophie ran into his office, holding up a crumpled paper. It was a drawing she made in class. A house with a garden. A little girl. A man with a briefcase. And standing next to them, a woman with long brown hair and a kind smile. "Who's this?" Daniel asked gently, pointing to the woman. Sophie beamed. "That's Miss Taylor. She makes me feel like Mommy used to." Daniel felt his throat tighten. That night, he sat in his penthouse, overlooking the city skyline, and made a decision that shocked everyone. He stepped down as CEO. He didn't retire. Instead, he took a smaller role, handed the reins to someone he trusted, and cleared space in his life for what mattered most. Sophie stayed at Meadow Lane. Daniel and Grace continued to grow closer, not rushed or dramatic, just real, honest, patient love. Over time, he became a familiar face at bake sales and school concerts, not as the billionaire, but as Sophie's dad. They never saw the mistake coming. But it turned out to be the best one he ever made. Because sometimes, the wrong school leads you to the right people. And sometimes, a single act of misdirection opens the door to healing, hope, and love again.